Hello everyone, this is Many Ninja speaking. For today's episode, we are going to be looking at the Black Hole Toys Son of Ghost figure, which, as you can kind of guess from the telltale packaging here, is a recreation version of the Final Battle Jiren SH Figuarts figure, but with a couple of extras kind of added on there, which seems to be kind of the soup du jour of this particular company, recreating previously existing stuff, but then tossing some extras along with some weird packaging to kind of help sell the package a little more. As we look into the clamshell that's in the package there, you can see not only does it include all the stuff that kind of fits in with the standard Final Battle Jiren figure, but also seems to include a number of different accessories that were part of the original Jiren release, which honestly would fit one or the other. They're interchangeable because everything in terms of the accessories and wrist and leg pegs and heads are the exact same size on both toys, so it kind of makes sense to include them here. Speaking of size, the size in this one is about 6.5 inches tall, and presentation wise, it's, at least from my memory, pretty close to what we have on the original one. Although maybe the height might be slightly different. I remember the original figure of Jiren being particularly tall. Now, as we go into the review of the articulation test as it's playing in the background here, what I will say on this one is it's actually fairly close to what you would expect on the real deal, meaning that it has the exact same number of articulation points as the real figure does, has entirely functioning butterfly joints, all the elbow and wrist pegs seem to work fine. Bicep swivel, I would say, at least on my copy, is a bit tight, definitely a bit squeaky, which actually kind of reminds me that the original Jiren figure also kind of had an issue with their biceps being a bit tight on a bunch of them, which kind of led to things possibly snapping when you're trying to interchange between the locked arm things, or crossed arms pose, which is also included on this particular package. Thankfully enough, at least based at the time of this review, I didn't have that much of an issue in here. It isn't where something would be so tight it's going to break, but it is worth noting that it is a bit on the stiff side, and you probably want to heat around the figure a bit before you kind of mess around with it and try to interchange certain joints, but we'll elaborate on more on that later. Now, in terms of all the legs, you can see everything has the exact same range of motion as what the original figure would have in this case, or any official one for that matter. And generally speaking, at least while things are a bit tight, meaning they're going to hold their positions fairly well, which is better than I can say for some official releases. Speaking of which though, as it turns out, yes, the official release, which is the one on the left, is going to be a slight bit taller and bigger in some dimensions than what the Son of Ghost figure offers. That being said, if I didn't put them side by side with this, you'd honestly be hard pressed to tell. Now that we have it up there though, you can kind of see especially certain bits like I would say the shoulders in particular are a bit larger on the real deal, a little more prominent, probably because the upper body is also a bit larger. Much like the Bulma figure which I reviewed last time, everything is definitely kind of copied and recasted for the most part. I'll elaborate on that in a minute. So that effectively means that everything on the Son of Ghost figure is for at least somewhat smaller. Although in some cases a little more obvious when something is kind of out of scale. Like the upper body, when you really look at it, yeah, on the recreation one is definitely a bit smaller than what it has on the official figure. That being said, what I was found surprising is in certain cases the detailing or etching is actually better on the bootleg or recreation, whatever you want to call it in this case. It's either just as accurate, if not a bit more sharp, which is actually quite surprising. Also, looking at the knees, they're both glossy in both cases. There's a lot of attention to detail on this one, which is, frankly, for what is just kind of a recreation version, incredibly surprising. That being said, everything is, as I mentioned, not exactly a one-for-one. You'll notice that on the butterfly joint in particular, because the upper body on the real Jiren figure is slightly larger, it does allow for more movement, especially in the butterfly joint moving up and down. It moves in and out just fine. It's unfortunately lost some of its up and down movement just because with the smaller upper torso, it's just too tight to accommodate that. That being said though, it is also worth noting this might be something for someone who maybe lost some parts from the original Jiren figure. You probably could get away with using some of the parts from the Son of Ghost in order to kind of compensate for that, because aside from maybe certain things maybe being a bit loose like that, when you're trying to swap the heads, I find it is not a perfect one-for-one match, so there is a slight discrepancy in how tight the grip is. Things like the wrist pegs and other things are virtually identical, so yeah, if you lost like a set of hands or something like that, or certain effect pieces, you probably could use things from this recreation figure in order to patch up things on the real one. And it would be really hard to tell because in terms of most of the fittings and everything, and color matching especially. Son of Ghost is incredibly close to what the real one had. Heck, if I didn't show you certain things like how the joints were so oddly glossy or just really pointing things out, it might be really hard to tell. On that note, we're moving to accessories at this point, with the real figure stuff being on the left and the Son of Ghost stuff being on the right, being divided by these much larger effect pieces. Well, they're accurate to the original Jiren figure, and quite colorful at that. It seems to be, from what I remember, a particularly well done recreation of those. Now, in terms of the hands, honestly, if you aren't looking for certain things, like maybe certain details like around the palms being a bit softer on the recreation version, and there being a bit more flash in terms of where these things were casted, you could easily mix them up. Effect pieces, for where it's applicable, okay, not as hard to mix up. The recreation version, the clenched energy ball, is not as colorful as the real deal, and is slightly smaller, which means it also has a little bit of an odd fit with the hands, or its related hand on there. That being said, stuff like the glowing punches, the glowing fist hands, they're not included in the original one, neither is that hair grabbing piece. Those are unique to the Son of Ghost figure. In terms of the faces, well, now that we have them kind of side by side here, there is a slight different coloration in terms of the skin tone used on the heads in particular, but it's kind of negligible. You technically could swap one of there, it'll just stand out just a smidge. This is one of the unique heads that they included on this particular toy though. I don't know where they got that particular logo on the forehead from. Doesn't seem to mean anything to me personally. And of course the cross arms is basically just a slightly doctored or edited version of the one that came from the original Jiren toy, but including the battle scars and the torn gloves. How this fits on the particular toy? Here's how that kind of works out. Here are the arms or the shoulders when you remove the general arms on there, and at least on my version, it took a little bit of an effort in order to make the arm swap work for the crossed arms, because while you can easily get one arm in order to peg into the shoulder bit, or for the cross arms, getting the other one in there is a bit of a tight fit. Now, the way I eventually got around to it is, I soaked the whole thing in some hot water for a little while, and once things were kind of softened enough, then I could manage to get it to squeeze in, but still having to use quite a bit of force in order to kind of make that work. I would definitely suggest when you're swapping this particular part in and out, you want to use some hot water or something similar to kind of really warm up the plastic to make it more pliable. That being said, once you get on there, it looks particularly good. I would not recommend making that swap constantly, because you are definitely kind of putting some wear and tear trying to force the toy to go in that way. That being said, everything else in terms of accessories, especially the added flaming effects, while the palmed ball does seem to require a little more work to get in the fit in, it took quite a bit of time before it got this particular shot, everything else just works just fine and fits without much hassle, and honestly looks really good on the figure. I would have to say this particular toy is for those that are looking to collect the line, but weren't collecting or missed out on the original Final Battle Jiren figure, but wouldn't mind doing a little bit of trade-off in terms of a little articulation range loss, as well as a slight inaccuracy in height, for a bunch of extras based off the original Jiren figure as a whole complete package. All in all, it's a pretty good deal, I would have to argue on that one. And if you don't have the real one, then Son of Ghost is a good alternative. Thanks for watching. Catch you all later.